Let's take a moment to consider something that might feel a bit unconventional, especially as we move into the later chapters of life. Independence and personal well-being can become powerful choices, perhaps even some of the most rewarding decisions you'll ever make. Today, we're going to explore a structured analysis, breaking down 6 logical reasons why friendships, which may have once felt essential, might not hold the same necessity after you reach your 70s. This isn't about pushing people away or embracing loneliness, not at all. Instead, it's about understanding how shifting your focus inward can enhance your mindset, increase your sense of freedom, and even improve your overall health. We'll carefully examine how letting go of social ties that no longer enrich your days can free you from burdens you might not even realize you're carrying. The goal here is clarity, to show you that living life on your own terms, without the weight of unnecessary expectations, can be both liberating and fulfilling. This exploration is designed to be practical and thoughtful, offering you insights that are easy to digest and apply, particularly if you're in your later years or supporting someone who is. By the end, you might find that releasing the pressure to maintain certain friendships doesn't just feel good. It could transform how you view yourself in your time ahead. So let's proceed with an open mind. We'll move step by step, using examples and reasoning to build a clear picture. If this resonates with you, I encourage you to stay with me until the conclusion, where we'll tie it all together. Now let's begin this journey of discovery with the first reason. Reason 1, the quest for validation fades away. One of the most freeing discoveries we often make after 70 is that we no longer need to prove ourselves to anyone. A realization that can quietly transform how we view friendships. When we were younger, our social world frequently revolved around earning approval, whether it was impressing coworkers, fitting into a group, or simply feeling included in the plans of others. Friendships back then were sometimes a stage, a place where we performed to be seen as worthy, likable, or successful, driven by an inner need to know we mattered in the eyes of those around us. But with age comes a deeper understanding. After decades of living, building a life, and facing its highs and lows, the opinions of others lose their grip, and we find that our worth doesn't depend on a crowd to confirm it. This shift isn't about shutting people out. It's about stepping into a confidence that comes from within, where external validation becomes a footnote rather than the headline of our story. Imagine Harold, a man in his early 70s who spent years climbing the corporate ladder, surrounded by colleagues and acquaintances he called friends. His days were filled with networking, maintaining ties that often felt more like extensions of his job than true bonds of affection. When retirement came, Harold watched those connections fade. Phone calls stopped, invitations dried up, and at first he felt a tug to hold on to them, to keep his social standing alive. Then he paused and asked himself a simple question. Why chase relationships that only thrive because of work, not because of real care or shared joy? Instead of reaching out, Harold turned to himself, picking up old hobbies like painting and woodworking that he'd once loved but set aside. Without the pressure to impress or be accepted, he found a quiet satisfaction in his own company, a freedom that felt new and deeply right. The logic here is clear. When we let go of the need for others to validate us, we stop spending energy on friendships that don't truly enrich our lives. After 70, you've already built your legacy through family, work, or simply the person you've become, and you don't need a chorus of voices to tell you who you are. This doesn't mean cutting off everyone. It's about releasing the ones that feel like habits, not treasures, and trusting that you're enough as you are. Think about it. How many ties have you kept just because it's what you've always done? Harold's story shows that letting go of that need can lighten your load, giving you room to live for yourself, on your terms in a way that feels honest and good. Reason 2. Peace takes precedence over social demands. As we settle into our later years, especially after crossing the threshold of 70, something remarkable often begins to shift in how we experience the world around us. The lively hum of social gatherings, the steady rhythm of conversations with friends, and the energy of being surrounded by others, once so vital to our sense of belonging, start to give way to a quieter, more precious desire: peace. This isn't about turning our backs on companionship or choosing a life of isolation. It's about noticing that the calm of our own space can sometimes feel more nourishing than the effort it takes to keep up with social demands. In our youth, being with people often felt like a cornerstone of life, a way to stay connected, to share laughter, to feel part of a bigger story unfolding around us. The chatter, the gatherings, the shared moments were threads in a tapestry we wove to mark our days as full and meaningful. But as we age, with decades of experiences behind us, we begin to treasure something different. Not the noise of constant interaction, but the stillness that lets us breathe, reflect, and simply be, free from the pull of obligations. Consider Margaret, a 74-year-old woman whose journey beautifully illustrates this gentle turn toward tranquility. For years, Margaret thrived in a busy social world. Lunches with friends, group calls to catch up, holiday parties that spilled into her home with warmth and voices. Her life was a calendar of connections, each event a chance to nurture the bonds she'd built over time, a role she embraced with care and pride. Yet as the years rolled on, she started to feel a change, not in her friends, but in herself, a weariness that crept in after conversations that once sparked joy now felt repetitive or heavy. Some friends called only to vent, others lingered on gossip she no longer cared for. And slowly, what had been a source of delight became a quiet drain on her spirit. One day, Margaret chose to step back, not out of anger, but out of a longing for something simpler. She declined invitations that didn't lift her heart, let calls wait without guilt, and opened herself to the quiet she'd been missing. What she found was a revelation. Instead of emptiness, there was peace, a soothing stillness that felt like coming home after a long journey. She took leisurely walks, listening to the wind through the trees, read books she'd shelved for years, and savored mornings with just her thoughts and a cup of tea. This wasn't loneliness. It was a rediscovery of her own company, a space where she could rest without the weight of keeping up with anyone else. The reasoning here is both practical and profound. Friendships, even the good ones, often come with threads of responsibility, calls to make, plans to keep, expectations to meet. While these might have energized us in our younger days, they can start to feel like tasks as we grow older, pulling us away from the calm we now crave. After 70, we've earned the freedom to decide how our time is spent. And for many, that means choosing peace over the effort of socializing when it no longer fits. Margaret's story shows us that this choice isn't a retreat, it's a gift, a way to honor ourselves by prioritizing what restores us most. Think about your own days. How often have you felt tugged by social duties, even when you'd rather linger in a quiet moment alone? By letting go of that tug, you're not losing connection. You're gaining a serenity that's yours to enjoy, a reward for a life well lived. Reason 3. Fewer friendships reduce disappointments. As we journey past 70, carrying the weight of years and the lessons they've taught us, we often come face to face with a truth that's both humbling and freeing. Not every friendship we've cherished is built to last, nor should it be. Over time, we've likely felt the slow drift of once dear companions, the quiet ache of promises unkept, or the dawning realization that some bonds were more about our giving than their returning. In our younger days, these moments might have stung deeply, prompting us to question ourselves or try harder to hold on. But after 70, with a lifetime of relationships behind us, we begin to see these experiences differently. Fewer friendships don't just lighten our social load, they also spare us the disappointments that can come with expecting more than others are willing to give. This isn't about growing bitter or closing our hearts. It's about choosing a simpler path, one that protects our peace by letting go of ties that no longer serve us well. Picture William, a 78-year-old man whose life offers a clear lens on this shift, one that many of us might recognize in our own stories. Through the decades, William had woven a tapestry of friendships, some from his school days, others from long hours at work, a few from shared passions like fishing or cards. He saw himself as the steady one, always ready with a call, a memory, a helping hand when life turned rough for those he cared about. Yet as time wore on, he noticed a change, not in his effort, but in theirs. Friends he'd known forever grew distant, caught up in their own lives, or only reached out when they needed something from him. At first it hurt. He wondered why people he'd invested in seemed to fade so easily, why his loyalty wasn't matched with theirs. One evening, sitting alone with his thoughts, William had a moment of clarity. He hadn't failed them. He'd simply outgrown the need to carry relationships that didn't carry him back. Rather than fight to keep them alive, he let them slip away, focusing instead on the few bonds. Family, a couple of old pals, that flowed naturally, without strain or expectation. What he gained wasn't loneliness, but relief. A heart unburdened by the letdowns of one-sided effort. The logic here is straightforward and grounded in experience. Friendships, by their nature, thrive on mutual care. But when that balance falters, when you're the only one reaching out or showing up, it's natural to feel disappointed. After 70, our emotional reserves are too valuable to spend on chasing people who don't meet us halfway, and reducing those ties becomes a way to safeguard our well-being. This doesn't mean we distrust everyone or assume friendships are doomed. It's about discernment, keeping the ones that lift us up and releasing the ones that drag us down. Think back on your own life. How often have you felt that quiet pang when a friend didn't call back? Or the subtle frustration of giving more than you got? William's choice shows us that stepping away from those moments isn't a loss. It's a gain, a way to trade disappointment for calm, to focus on what's real and reciprocal. After all, at this stage, we deserve relationships that feel good, not ones that leave us wondering why we bothered. Reason 4. Time becomes a precious resource. As we step into the years beyond 70, enriched by a lifetime of moments both big and small, we often find ourselves looking at time in a new light, not as an endless river, but as a finite gift to be held with care. In our younger days, time seemed abundant, a resource we could spend freely on friends, social gatherings, and the chatter that filled our hours without much thought. Back then, maintaining a wide circle of connections felt like a natural part of life, a way to build memories and stay woven into the fabric of our communities. But as we age, with decades behind us and fewer ahead, we start to feel its value more keenly. And this shift prompts us to ask, how do we want to spend these precious hours, and do all our friendships still deserve a share of them? This isn't about selfishness, it's about wisdom, a recognition that time is ours to shape, and we can choose to fill it with what truly brings us joy. Let's meet Richard, a man in his early 80s whose story captures this change with a clarity that might resonate with many of us. For years, Richard lived a life brimming with social energy, Dinner parties with friends, outings with groups, regular calls that kept him tethered to a network he'd built over time. He loved the bustle, the laughter, the sense of being part of something lively and full. But as he grew older, he began to notice a quiet shift. Those long conversations started to tire him, and the gatherings, once so exciting, felt more like duties he had to fulfill. One afternoon, sitting through a lunch filled with small talk and complaints he'd heard before, Richard had a moment of truth. He didn't want to spend his time this way anymore. Instead of saying yes out of habit, he started saying no when his heart wasn't in it, turning his attention to things that lit him up. Reading history books, walking by the river, learning to bake bread just for the smell of it. What surprised him most wasn't the loss of company, but the gain of fulfillment. He felt more alive in those quiet, chosen moments than he had in years of social routines. The reasoning here is simple yet powerful. Friendships, even the pleasant ones, require time. Time to call, to visit, to plan. And not every bond we've carried forward still earns that investment. After 70, when every day feels like a treasure, we have the right to be selective, to ask ourselves if a relationship adds to our happiness or just fills space out of old habit. This doesn't mean we abandon all connection. It's about honoring our time by giving it to what matters most, whether that's a dear friend who still brings a smile or a solitary pursuit that feeds our soul. Think about your own life. How many hours have you given to social ties that feel more like chores than pleasures? Richard's choice shows us that saying no to those can open up a yes to yourself, letting you reclaim time for the things that make your days feel rich and yours alone. Reason 5. True companionship comes from within. As we embrace the years beyond 70, seasoned by a lifetime of growth and discovery, one of the most profound truths we often uncover is that the deepest companionship we can find doesn't always come from others. It comes from ourselves. In our younger days, we were taught to seek connection outside, to build happiness through friends who filled our lives with laughter, support, and shared stories. Society told us that being social was the key to a full life, that solitude was something to avoid, a shadow to chase away with the presence of others. But after decades of knowing ourselves, our strengths, our quirks, our dreams, we begin to see that we are enough, that the quiet presence within us can be a source of comfort and joy all on its own. This isn't about rejecting friendship. It's about realizing that the most reliable companion we'll ever have is already here, ready to be embraced when we let it. Meet Eleanor, a 76-year-old woman whose story lights the way to this understanding with a gentle, relatable glow. For much of her life, Eleanor believed that happiness meant staying busy with people, making plans with friends, checking in regularly, keeping her days full of voices and activity. She was the one who organized outings, who listened patiently, who adjusted herself to fit into conversations, all to avoid the stillness she'd been told was lonely. But over time, she felt a growing exhaustion, not from the people, but from the effort of always being on for them, a role that left her drained rather than renewed. One day, Eleanor decided to try something different. She stopped forcing the plans, let the phone sit quiet, and spent time with herself as she would with a dear friend. She walked alone through her neighborhood, sat in cafes with a book instead of a companion, and let her evenings unfold with her own thoughts instead of others' words. To her surprise, she didn't feel empty. She felt lighter, more at peace, as if she'd rediscovered a part of herself she'd overlooked in the rush to stay connected. The logic here is both simple and deep. After 70, we've spent so long learning who we are that we don't need others to fill our time or define our worth. Our own company can do that beautifully. Friendships can be wonderful, but they're not the only path to fulfillment. Sometimes they distract us from the richness of being alone with ourselves, free from the need to perform or please. This doesn't mean shutting out the world. It's about finding strength within so that any connections we keep are bonuses, not necessities. Think about your own moments. How often have you pushed aside your own quiet joys to meet someone else's expectations? Eleanor's path reminds us that solitude isn't a lack. It's a presence, a chance to enjoy the wisdom and warmth we've cultivated over a lifetime. A companionship that never lets us down. Reason 6. Letting go opens the door to fulfillment. As we stand in the glow of our later years, past the milestone of 70, one of the most powerful choices we can make is to let go. Not of everything, but of the things that no longer light up our days, including friendships that have grown heavy or faded. In our younger years, we often held tight to social ties, building our lives around them, believing that a full circle of friends was the measure of a life well lived. We showed up to gatherings, answered calls, kept up routines, sometimes out of love, but often out of habit, a sense that this was just what we were supposed to do. But with age comes a clarity that cuts through the noise. Letting go of friendships that feel like work doesn't close us off. It opens us up, making space for a life that's simpler, freer, and more truly ours. This isn't about isolation. It's about choosing what fills our hearts, not just our time. Take James, a man in his late 70s, whose story paints this idea with a warmth and truth we can feel. For decades, James saw staying social as the key to a good life. He kept in touch with old friends, attended events, filled his days with the hum of connection, even when it started to feel hollow. He thought busyness meant happiness, that letting ties slip would leave him adrift. But one day, after yet another gathering that left him tired instead of glad, he realized he wasn't enjoying it. The talks were the same, the effort one-sided, the joy gone. So James made a change. He stopped forcing the friendships that no longer fit, stepping away from the ones that felt like chores, and turned instead to what really mattered to him. He spent mornings outdoors, breathing the fresh air, worked on his health with gentle walks, and learned new skills like gardening, just for the pleasure of it. What he found wasn't emptiness, but a lightness, a life unshackled from duty, where fulfillment came from living his way, not someone else's. The reasoning here is clear and uplifting. When we release the pressure to hold on to every friendship, we don't lose. We gain room for what brings us real happiness, whether it's quiet moments alone or the few bonds that still spark joy. After 70, we've earned the right to stop doing things out of should and start doing them out of want, letting go of what weighs us down to embrace what lifts us up. This doesn't mean we turn away from everyone. It's about aligning our lives with what feels natural and good, not what's expected. Think about your own path. How many friendships have you kept just because they've always been there? James shows us that letting go isn't the end. It's a beginning, a doorway to a life that's yours to shape, full of the peace and purpose you deserve. As we come to the end of this journey together, reflecting on the 6 reasons we've explored, it's worth taking a moment to let these ideas settle, like leaves falling gently after a long season. We've seen how, after 70, the need for friendships can shift, not because connection loses its value, but because we gain the wisdom to choose what truly enriches our lives, letting go of what doesn't. This isn't about shutting out the world or embracing loneliness. It's about finding freedom, a chance to live on our own terms, free from pressures that once defined us. From Harold, who found peace in his hobbies, To Margaret, who cherished quiet walks, to William, Richard, Eleanor, and James. Each story showed us that stepping back from unnecessary ties can bring more joy, more time, and a deeper sense of self than we might have expected. The heart of this message is simple. You don't need a crowd to feel whole. You've already built a life full of meaning, and now you can savor it in the way that feels right to you. Maybe you've already felt this shift, noticing how much you enjoy your own company. Or perhaps these ideas offer a new lens to see your days through. Either way, it's okay to prioritize yourself, to choose peace over duty, time over habit, and fulfillment over expectation. As you move forward, consider what stood out most to you, what you might try in your own life, knowing you've earned this chance to shape your later years with care and confidence.